travel didn't have to mean stress, fear, or leaving someone behind. In this episode of CareLab, we explore how accessible travel is redefining rest and adventure for families with mobility or medical needs, and why caregivers deserve more than just a break.
And we are doing this with Amberlee Wiese. She is an occupational therapist who turned accessible travel entrepreneur. After years of working with
It's
patients
Weiss.
and families navigating complex health challenges, she saw how often caregivers were left behind because they were overworked but undersupported and rarely able to enjoy meaningful rest or connection while traveling, or it was stopping them from traveling in the first place. That inspired her to build a travel business that helps families, especially those with mobility or medical needs, experience the world without fear or overwhelm. Amberlee now also helps other travel professionals get started through accessible travel planners and also admins a growing community that connects professional travel caregivers and the individuals and families in need of support on the go. Her mission is to make rest, adventure, and dignity accessible to everybody. Amberlee, welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much. Would you mind just getting started by sharing a little bit of your journey from how you went from, practicing occupational therapist to really focusing on accessible travel planning for people?
Sure. Yeah. So I started out as like a general occupational therapist, and I've pretty much worked in every setting except maybe inpatient rehab. And I did that for about 10 years or so. And then because of health issues, I was no longer able to work in like an inpatient setting. And so that really kind of forced me into thinking about entrepreneurship and having the flexibility of having my own business. So that's when I started my mobile occupational therapy business. And I did that for about 4 years. And then health issues and a surgery kind of knocked me out. And I realized that I didn't really want to be like a owner with employees and having all that stress. So while I was recovering from back surgery, I saw another occupational therapist working in travel, and she was just starting to talk about how we can combine our skills with the travel industry. And I was like, it makes so much sense because we help people be independent at home. So, like, we can still help people be independent when they're out and about and traveling. And travel is fun and it's motivating for people. So I jumped right in and have been doing it ever since.
That is awesome. So, okay, I can totally see the connections because I'm an occupational therapist. I know what we do. But would you go into a little bit, maybe even an example of how having an accessible travel planner is really important? Like, what does it look like without you and what does it look like with you there?
Okay. Yeah. So I'll start with, if you don't have someone, there's a lot of stress placed on the actual traveler and the caregivers for, the logistics, making sure that the location is accessible, making sure it will fit their needs, because accessible means different things for different people. And as you probably know, when you're out and about, businesses don't always have places that are fully accessible, even though they advertise it. So when somebody travels and they don't look at all those things, sometimes they can get to the hotel or a tour and realize that they can't go on it or they can't get into their room and things like that. So it's just really stressful to kind of leave your safety of your home and the good setup of your home into the world where it's not perfectly set up for you sometimes. So that's where an accessible travel planner really looks at the details. And as an occupational therapist, we really match the person's function with their environment. So being able to do that as a travel planner has been really similar, actually. I kind of do an evaluation and ask them, what can you do? What are things that you'd like to do? And then I try to, match the destination with their needs. So those are kind of the differences.
Awesome. Okay. So as you're talking, one of the things that comes to mind for me is so often, we encourage caregivers to take breaks, take care of themselves, get respite care. And a lot of times, the whole idea of being able to go on vacation, if you are providing care for another person, is that you have to find respite care for that person so that you can leave them behind and you can go and you can have this time on your own or this vacation on your own. And your kind of model here really changes that potential paradigm and that potential dynamic. Can you talk a little bit about the benefits of doing travel with your care partner?
Yeah, that's a great question. The last thing we'd want to hear is somebody's being left behind because they don't have the supports available when they're traveling. So that's where we really come in and try to educate the caregiver on, there are supports out there. Sometimes it's just, I guess, inspiring them that this is possible. Like my first client, I was actually seeing him for occupational therapy, and then his wife was saying, she was the caregiver, and she was saying that they wanted to go see family halfway across the country and they weren't sure how to fly. And he didn't have head control. He had to use suction, he used a power chair. And really, I didn't do that much because she is such a great caregiver. But I was just like, it's possible. Like, if we have some support set up. And she was like, she just went for it and booked the flight and got to see their family. And it was awesome to hear about it. So, and I think it was their 40th anniversary too. So things like that, just inspiring people that like you can bring your loved one with you if you have the right supports. And let's talk about what that means exactly. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, I think well, also that's why the name of your business is really awesome because it's back to life. So much of therapy is focused on, yes, back to life, but back to like the basics because that's where you got to start, right? But then once you've got your home setup done and you guys have a system and things are working pretty well, then it's like, okay, how can I get back to life when we do things outside of just brushing our teeth and getting out of the bed and going to work or whatever, right? Everybody desires, we do those things so we can do the fun things, right? And so travel either used to be a part of lots of people's lives or they want it to be, and then let's say something interrupted that. And so my question is, because I travel a lot and I love travel, and I have worked with travel agents, and I know that they spend some of their time going to the places in order to experience them so they can better educate their clients, but the world is endless. And so I'm assuming that you haven't been all the places that people might ask you to help them get to. And because sometimes things are advertised in not such a fair, accessible way, how is it that you like parse through and figure out like, is this place that we're looking at going actually accessible? What are the things that we need to do? And what are some of those supports that help you make sure that like this is gonna go really well?
Yeah, so there's vendors or suppliers that cater to accessibility. And they actually have boots on the ground that take pictures of the rooms. They take pictures of the like hotel lobby and the size of the elevator and things like that. So there are some networks out there that actually look at things like that. And then it's just a lot of back and forth with the locations, and some are better at communicating than others. Some will actually take a picture of the room that we're looking at, some won't. So I tell people, like, always make sure you have insurance, traveler's insurance, and then just keep an open mind that, like, it may not be set up perfectly like your home is, but if you kind of have that sense of adventure, we can still try to make it work. And then there's like different, like, there's some cruise lines that I know are more accessible than others. There's some destinations that I know are more accessible than others. So kind of have that all in the back of my mind. And then we also have a network of accessible travel planners who have been certified, and we can bounce ideas off each other. There's a huge accessible travel community that there's people traveling all the time in wheelchairs or, with neurodivergence and things like that. So you can bounce ideas off of them too. So lots of support out there. It's not perfect all the time, but I have lots of ways I can kind of filter through all that information.
What strikes me as you're talking is just how like detail oriented this work has to be, right? Especially the more complex the needs of a person, almost like the more finely you have to think about things like how big is the elevator? How far does that door open? You know, even getting down into like really nitty gritty stuff sometimes, like, thinking about home modifications, one of the things that we look at all the time is like door swing, like which direction does that door open? And when it opens, what is it blocking and what is it? And like having to think about and manage all of those really fine details from a distance is so important. It just makes perfect sense to me that like as an occupational therapist, that would be such a great fit. I'm wondering though, can you give an example, like a detail, or even maybe it's a specific story or something like that, that is either often overlooked if people are trying to do this kind of travel planning and maybe they're trying to do it on their own, so it would be a helpful tip, or, just something that is like that you're always on the lookout for?
Sure. I would say the width of the doorways into the bathroom, a lot of times those are too narrow for wheelchairs. The size of the elevator, because I had one hotel in Italy, they said they have an elevator and it's like, oh great, but then I was like, can I see a picture of the elevator, like maybe some measurements? And they were like, well, if the person can stand up and like fold their wheelchair, they'll be able to go up the elevator. And I was like, that probably won't work for my clients because she's unable to stand, and so we couldn't use that hotel. But things like that. On cruises, you want to make sure that the ports that they port at are, like, some of them are tender port, and that's where you have to transfer into a smaller boat, and then the boat takes you to port, and then there's other ones where like the ship can like dock right at the port, and like the ramps will be there and things like that. So those are some things that people tend to overlook. And it'd be horrible if you paid all this money for a cruise and then you have to just stay on it the whole time and just sit on the boat while everybody's out doing their tours and things like that. So those are the couple of things I see pretty often.
Do you have any like individual stories of either like failure that you wish that you were a part of, or so that wasn't a failure, or like super success of like how exciting it was for people to be able to realize an opportunity to get out into the world despite whatever challenges they were dealing with?
Yeah, I think one success was a lady that I met who had her own like blog and things like that, and she traveled a ton, and she's a wheelchair user on a portable vent, and it was just cool to see her traveling around the world. And I watched her videos about like getting in like a chair in Machu Picchu, Peru, to see like the ruins, and they just kind of like carried her up in there, and it was a little nerve-wracking because she didn't have great head control. So as an occupational therapist, oh, okay, but she was comfortable with it and wanted to
I
do it.
feel
And
I feel
so
sweaty thinking about that, like
yeah.
especially with a portable vent involved, but
Yep.
like she was
Yep.
living her life the way she's living her life the way she wants to live it, and that's actually what we're
Yep.
here to support, right? So
Exactly. Yep. I'm not going to tell somebody that they can't do it. I just tell them, let's give you all the information and then you can decide if you want to do it or not. A failure would probably be the port situation. So, like, I've heard of somebody booking a huge, huge cruise for their entire family, and they had to sit on the boat while their family went on the tours and things like that, and they didn't know it until they got on the cruise. So those are a couple things.
yeah, that's kind of heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Do you feel like overall accessibility in travel is getting better? Is it worse than it used to be? Is it about the same? Like, is this something that people are being more thoughtful about in general, do you think?
Well, I haven't been in the business too long to know like long-term trends, but I know that people are advocating, and we've got a huge group of people who are doing accessible travel and making waves as far as like spreading the word, kind of like I am right now. We're creating like a network or like a database to list accessible travel planners. So I think that's improving as far as like making it easier for people to find somebody. Then we created the certification course. So if somebody's certified in accessible travel, then that they've gone through the steps and the training to, recognize these barriers and things like that and look at the big picture. Because before you would just reach out to a travel agent and hope that they would think about things like that. So I think that's getting better, but the industry as a whole has a long way to go, especially in other countries because they don't have the Americans with Disabilities Act. They don't have laws for accessibility, or maybe it's a country with like really old buildings and it's really hard to add adaptations. So I think that has ways to go too.
Okay, so I'm so glad you said that about other countries and how, okay, I'm going to back up and say, sometimes I think that we get a little bit, it's okay to push forward and try to make things better, but I think we forget that like we have made a ton of progress here in America, and there's a lot of structures in place to try to make things accessible. It's certainly not universal, but it's even more so, less accessible in other places outside of here because of those structures that are not necessarily in place, and just like the age of other places in the world compared to the age of places here. And so in that, I know that your goal is to help make sure that people are traveling where they want to go. Would you say that most people who come to you are like, I'm trying to plan a trip to London, help me make it accessible? Or are people coming to you and saying, we just want to get out of here and go do something? Where's the best place to go that is already fairly accessible that we should go to?
It's a little bit of both, actually. I have people who have like their dream destinations that they want me to look into. And then there's other people where part of my role is to help kind of filter down to what exactly they want. Because I've had some people say, like, I just want to go to a beach. And it's like, okay, do you want a beach that you can swim in? Do you want a less crowded beach? All these questions that I ask to kind of filter it down to exactly where they want. And sometimes during that process, we find out that, like, there's something that they didn't think about that they forgot to tell me. And it's like, okay, that narrows it down a lot more. So, yeah, a little bit of both.
And so as a follow-up to that, is there like a place that maybe people haven't thought of that is actually pretty accessible. Like one of the things that I often say before you said this about the tendering was like cruises are pretty accessible and a good way to see different places. Is there another thing that you're like, hey, if you don't have like a plan, this is a great like way to get started maybe?
Yes, I usually recommend like Barcelona, Spain, or like Rome, Italy. Part of those are because there's really good suppliers there that actually specialize in accessible tours and hotels and things like that. So I know that they're going to be well taken care of when I connect them with that supplier. I wouldn't say there's like a place that outside of the US that is like super accessible that I tell everybody to go to, but those top two ones are really good. There's really good support there, and I know they're going to be taken care of pretty well. So
I I want to switch gears just a little bit here. One of the things that is often really challenging for both care partners in a care relationship is like the change of roles and the change in relationship that can happen when you go from a situation where, you're husband and wife to where you're husband and wife, but now you're also care partners. Or, you're an adult child who is now taking care of their parent or any of those things, right? Like that loss of roles, that change of roles, the change in relationships can be really challenging for people. Do you see the ability to share something joyful together, like travel? Do you see impacts on those relationships that have a positive impact on both of the care partners too?
oh yes, definitely. Like even if somebody hires like a travel companion or even a travel caregiver, that takes some stress off of the logistic and, the physical work of being with your person that you're caring for. So I think that allows the person traveling to have a good time and focus on, the vacation aspect versus like the care aspect of things. So that's where like the Facebook group that I started really connects people with the caregivers or companions so that they can have that great time together and focus on their relationship together and just all the fun things that happen and the positives of travel by taking some of the stress and the load off of the caregiver. So definitely.
I'm wondering a little bit more about the certification and the kinds of things that you learn in a certified class because I could hear some naysayers maybe thinking like, hey, I got like Expedia and the internet and ChatGPT, and so well, maybe it might take me time to do. What are some of the like, maybe not to the specifics, but like some of the things that you learn or like are expert at that really help make sure that the trip is amazing and is giving somebody a leg up more than just like the time management piece of it, of the planning?
Yeah, so there's travel agents out there who have lived experience, like maybe they use a wheelchair and things like that, which is great and it really comes in handy. But disability is such a wide spectrum, and the certification really talks about like sensory, cognitive, physical mobility, things like that. Because, like, if somebody maybe uses a wheelchair, but they also get overwhelmed in crowds, like, you don't want to put them on a ginormous cruise, or like maybe they have sensory sensitivities, and so you want to be mindful of that. So I think that certification really helps consumers like understand that we look at all needs and all, like, even people don't identify as disabled but they have some needs when they travel, so we're really mindful of that. And I think that's a really strong point with getting certified.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think I actually really love that you brought up that there are lots of types of accommodations and reasons why travel might be difficult for people. And a lot of times we sort of automatically hone in on folks who have difficulty walking or wheelchair users or, people with obvious like physical challenges in terms of travel. But there are so many people who have needs for accommodations that might not be outwardly visible to us that really, really impact their ability to go out and enjoy a space, enjoy an activity, and of course impacts their families or their care partner, whoever that is, that person's ability to go and do things together too. And so I just wanted to say, like, I appreciate so much that you're thinking about those things and that there are folks out there who, are taking those kinds of issues into account. Do you have any like examples or stories or anything like that? Or again, any tips involving those sort of more like invisible challenges that people might have?
Yes, I actually live with invisible challenges, so that's near and dear to my heart. And some tips I would say is like, especially with flying, like I've gotten used to asking for a wheelchair assistant because I want to save that energy for the fun of my trip versus like actually traveling to get there. So I tell people don't be afraid to ask for help or maybe do something that you don't normally have at home, like have a scooter when you're out and about. Like maybe you can walk around your home independently, but walking long distances really wears you out or increases pain. So don't be afraid to, adapt to being out and about and kind of going out of your comfort zone. And then just like building in rest break, always plan for more time than you think you would need usually, because just the stress of travel is a lot different than day-to-day activities. So those are a few of the tips that I give. And they do make these sunflower lanyards, and I just found out my local airport is starting to be aware of them, but it's an invisible disabilities kind of
Oh.
sign, I guess. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it
No,
just
but that's
shows like
cool.
the airport staff that you have either like a hearing loss or something invisible. You don't look disabled, but you need some extra assistance. So just it helps people be aware that there are people out there that look healthy, but maybe they need some extra help. So
I am so glad that you brought up the like energy conservation and energy management piece of it, because there are so many people who might not even consider themselves having a disability that could benefit from that. Because if you think about, this is what happens. I'm not going to put this on everybody. I'm just talking about myself, okay? You go on a trip and you're so excited about getting there, and you think about all the things that maybe I want to make sure I'm close to the beach, I want to be walking distance to this. You do all the things about the place, but then you forget about like the getting to the place. And like as a person who's traveled a lot, I think so much more about that now. And I'm fully able-bodied, right? So, but that still is draining. The difference between like, do I want to drive to this place versus fly? There's benefits and negatives to both sides of that, and I need to weigh the cost, right? And so like if you're flying somewhere and you have to walk across a big airport, airports are huge. There's so many steps you get in when you're traveling. Even if it's just like, I gotta park my car, I gotta walk to the little shuttle, I gotta take the shuttle to the airport, I gotta stand in line. Maybe not even steps, just standing in line takes energy. And I think we highly underestimate how much effort that takes. And I think about that in advance so that you're not like recovering from the travel there during the time that you're supposed to be like exploring and doing whatever at your vacation is like such a golden nugget that I think even a seasoned traveler sometimes needs to be told so that you can have your best trip. So I'm so grateful that you brought that out, because everybody can benefit from thinking about it that way, because you want to have a great time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And spending your energy in the way that works for the time that you're trying to have. And then like the second thing too that I'm always trying to encourage people to make their invisible disability visible. So like bring a cane, even if you're not terribly unsteady, but it just tells everybody else around you to just give me a little more space, right? Mm-hmm. And so the sunflower is even such a much better choice, because then you don't have to like bring an extra thing that you don't need, but you're also indicating to people that you need a little bit extra help, because that's so important. And like having people feel comfortable to do that is just like another thing, because most of the time people don't want to have an extra thing because they don't want to stand out in front of other people, but you do kind of need the help. And so I just encouraging everybody to just be more willing, because the end goal is having fun on your vacation. So do you have any additional parting tips that you want to give to people who are considering travel or wish they could go back to travel but feel like they can't?
Yeah, so like I've said before, like, your home is set up as a certain way, and you may be comfortable there, but if you have that desire to, see the world, kind of lean on that, and we'll find a way to kind of match the place that you want to go with your needs. And then there's people like me who are willing to take the extra time, get to know you and your needs, and we can make pretty much anything happen. Sometimes we have to guide you to maybe an alternative, but that's what our job is. But I would say don't let things like that hold you back.
That's such an amazing, like, final takeaway message. Where can people find you or find more about your services if they're listening to this and they're like, I want to do this. I want to take that step. Let's go.
So I have a website. It's backtolifetravel.com. So you can usually contact me through that. I even have a form that if you kind of know what you want to look into, you can fill that out and it'll send me a notification. You can also schedule like a phone call or a video chat with me too through there. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and things like that. But the website would probably be the easiest way to get in contact with me.
And of course, we'll go ahead and make sure that that is linked in the show notes. So whether you're watching this on YouTube or if you are listening to this wherever you listen to your podcast, if you go into the show notes, you should be able to link directly to Amberlee's website, backtolife.com, straight from there. Amberlee, thank you so much for being on this episode of CareLab. Listener, if you made it all the way to the end, please make sure to take a moment to like, subscribe, follow, leave a comment, leave a question, leave a review. Those are all really important ways that we can help make sure that more people are getting access to the important information that we're trying to share with the world here on CareLab. Until next time, we'll see you right back here on CareLab.
Bye,
Bye.
everybody.
Thank you.